Robert Johnson, also known as Bob Johnson, is the founder and CEO of Microboost and is a psychedelic and cognitive freedom advocate. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks a lot. Excited to be on here.
Yeah, there's all sorts of places we could start, but I'm curious, can you tell me what is Microboost?
Great. Yeah, Microboost is a functional mushroom company that me and some partners started about a year and a half ago. Functional mushrooms are also known as adaptogenic mushrooms or medicinal mushrooms. They're not shrooms. They're not the psychedelic hallucination type mushrooms. However, they do work in similar ways. Maybe the most famous adaptogenic mushroom is or popular is lion's mane. I think it gets a lot of credit and attention because it has a badass name for starters. But it's also one that's really focused on cognitive health and cognitive improvement. And so I think functional mushrooms are getting a lot of attention right now because of the interest and the media attention around microdosing psychedelics. And kind of similar to how as cannabis was legalizing, I was working in the cannabis industry here in LA since 2008. And as cannabis was becoming more mainstream, is legalizing in different states, the popularity of CBD started to kind of ride the tailwinds of that media attention. And people were learning, about the medicinal benefits of cannabis, and then finding out, oh, well, CBD has, similar properties, but without the psychoactive effects. So I really liken functional mushrooms are to psychedelics as CBD is to cannabis.
Got you, got you. And so you worked in cannabis since 2008. So it seems like you've been working in the kind of plant world for a long time. What drew you? Is there anything besides just pure business venture? What drew you to cannabis and then ultimately to functional mushrooms?
Yeah, well, I went to school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and got a degree in creative writing. And me and my business partner, who would be my business partner, was a writer friend of mine, my roommate in college, and we moved to LA in 2008, just in time for the economic recession, the housing collapse, and a writer's strike in Hollywood. So we were, getting whatever writing jobs that we could. I was ghost writing a book about redwood trees. It was like a spiritual novel that was an analogy about how redwood trees have a connected root system. And it was kind of an analogy about the family and about relationships. My roommate was writing, he was punching up jokes for like the skinny bitch books that were just like dating advice and all sorts of random stuff. But at the end of the day, after maybe a game of frisbee golf or something, we'd talk about how it would be really funny to start an edibles brand called I Can't Believe It's Pot Butter. And so it really just started as a joke. And but it became something that we talked about so often. I decided like, hey, we should either try this or just stop having this pipe dream. And so we started that and ended up becoming like one of the biggest edibles companies in California. And then because of this business that we kind of accidentally started in 2010, California was first gonna put legalization on the ballot. And one of the things that the bureaucrats weren't sure how to handle were edibles, right? And so we're making brownies, lemonades, all sorts of stuff. And they didn't know, like, okay, this is a brand new thing, right? We got to create a whole new organization to regulate cannabis. And there's already an organization to regulate food. So we don't know what to do with cannabis food. So maybe we'll just make it illegal. And so we thought that was, terrible. It was going to be bad for our business. And so we're like 23, 24 years old, and we started a trade association for edibles manufacturers. And there's a lab in Oakland called Steep Hill. They were like one of the first labs that was testing, THC in cannabis. And we contacted them and we said, hey, we want to start this trade association. We're going to get all the biggest edibles manufacturers in the state together. And like the first rule of our fight club is you have to test every batch of edibles. And they were stoked because it wasn't required to test cannabis, so almost nobody did it. Right? It's expensive, it takes a while, and a lot of times it'll give you information that says your product's not as good as your marketing says. But that was a really concern. Prior to this trade association, you would go into a dispensary, you see a brownie on the shelf and you wonder how strong it is, and the strength would say something like 10 skull and crossbones, just complete arbitrary unit of measurement. You have no idea what's going to happen. And then almost everybody who's ever tried a weed edible has had that experience where, oh, I tried it, well, maybe this is a weak batch or something. I could probably eat some more. And then, an hour later, it's way too much. And so, my whole career then has been about kind of trying to legitimize plant medicine, because if we're going to call it medicine, I think it should really be measurable, repeatable, consistent, and predictable. And so that experience, at a young age, making political change, really kind of being an activist for the cannabis industry, just really saw opened my eyes to what was possible. We actually we helped Kamala Harris become Attorney General of California that same election, and it was a super close election between Steve Cooley, who was the district attorney of LA and very anti-cannabis. So yeah, just ever since then, it's kind of just been an evolution. In 2018, we sold our cannabis business, and the CTO of that company and myself formed custom capsule consultants to make all sorts of different plant-based supplements. And now today we make lots of hemp, CBD, kratom, and functional mushroom products. So I just love learning about these things. I love, learning from people that know a lot more than me about it. And the community as well is just really inspiring, right? I don't think the government wanted cannabis legal, but small groups of people in now 40 plus states across the country, have made this happen. And so I think it's really like the coolest like grassroots movement of our generation.
Amazing. I'm curious, what is that like? 2008, you're in like your early 20s, you're launching a cannabis business, but technically cannabis was still illegal at the time, or is like very much a gray area, or what is that like navigating an emerging market that's also legally in a gray area?
Well, it gives me good experience for, new things that are in these emerging, gray spaces. Yeah, at the time, cannabis was made legal for medical use in 1996 in California. Um,
Oh,
in 2008, I moved to California the day Barack Obama was elected. And prior to that, 8 years of George Bush, there was all sorts of enforcement, right? Because it's still federally illegal. So the DEA would come in and smash and grab, arrest people. And so yeah, there was a lot of fear and paranoia, right? So I'd go around, a white guy kind of looks like a cop going into these dispensaries. They're like, hey, we don't know you, or we only buy from people we know. Uh, and so that was the idea. I was like, all right, well, we'll start an edibles company. Me and my roommate are aspiring stand-up comedians. So we go into the dispensary, butter them up literally with some like caramel corn and pot brownies, do 5 minutes of material, have them all laughing, and then leave and do that, like once a week for a couple of months until eventually we're just like, are we friends yet? Can we do some business together? But it was always kind of really silly, right? Like medicinal, the federal government kind of allowed for that to happen because they wanted commerce to exist in this kind of hippie commune made up, sort of exchange, right? You weren't customers, you're patients, and it's not a purchase, it's a donation, and it's a nonprofit, you're reimbursing the grower, and just a bunch of silly machinations for, just economy 101.
Yeah, like you're buying a hat and the cannabis was a gift.
Right. Yeah, that's what they're doing with mushrooms in DC now.
Is that how it is in DC now? I haven't been
Buy a
back home, but I
$50 sticker, and because the mushrooms are decriminalized there, which means you can possess it, you can grow it, and you can gift it, but you can't sell it. So you go into a dispensary in DC, you buy a $50 sticker, and they gift you a chocolate bar.
yeah, it's so wild. It's like we're just playing with like semantics at this point.
Exactly.
You know, do you know which states are decriminalized for mushrooms? Because I've even seen in some places, like in Orange County, you can buy mushroom chocolates like in a weed dispensary. And I don't know if that's like underground. Or like, have I discovered something I wasn't supposed to? Did I just like, did I spill the beans on the air here? Or like,
No, no.
how does this work, like policy wise? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, as far as states that have decriminalized, there's only two. It's Oregon and Colorado, and they've legalized, but for medicinal use only, right? And so now in Oregon, there's going to be products available, but it's only for people with extreme medical needs. And so that was like the subject of my most recent Rolling Stone article, right? Like similar to cannabis, like when we were cannabis activists, I'm a perfectly healthy 23-year-old kid, but I would go into city council meetings, pushing an old lady in a wheelchair, with glaucoma and cancer, and pleading to city council like, hey, we need this, for this woman's health, like, and no one's going to deny, the sick old lady with cancer, right? Or the veteran, right? Veterans are super bipartisan people to get behind, right? They want proper mental health and to be able to feel good coming back from wherever they're coming back from. And so I think that's just a stepping stone. But in reality, and in my opinion, anyways, I think that this medicine is good for anybody, and we've all kind of all experienced our own mini PTSD with COVID the past few years too. And so I think now more than ever, I think that was a big part of why psychedelics are so popular in the mainstream right now, is because the entire world took a pause and kind of had to look within, and now that's becoming more popular.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you about it seems like psychedelics are really peaking like in culture right now. I'm curious if you agree with that and if you think is it pandemic based or is there something more going on and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it is media influence. When psychedelics were first popularized, and right in the 60s, right in 1957, there was a Life magazine article about Maria Sabina, and she was this curandera in Mexico that would give psychedelic mushrooms to people. And so when Life magazine goes down there, writes an article about it, after that, a bunch of white people start going down there and taking the mushrooms, right? These ancient medicines have been used in practice for thousands of years in different native cultures. But now with fantastic fungi, great documentary on Netflix. Michael Pollan, author of Omnivore's Dilemma, best-selling author, came out with a book in 2017 called How to Change Your Mind.
Mhm.
And he's the 60s New York liberal who wrote this book and came to psychedelics from a skeptic's perspective. And throughout the course of the book, tries basically every psychedelic there is, interviews a bunch of people who have had life-changing events and experiences from it, and really changes his own mind throughout the course of the book. And so I think those are like the two most influential pieces of media, and everything from there is kind of spawned off. But you're right too. I think we're in a point of our spiritual evolution on this planet. I think COVID was a great wake up call that has like no precedent in at least in our lifetime. And so, yeah, all these things are kind of coalescing together to make people, wonder what's going on with microdosing. But I don't think it really answered your question earlier about chocolate bars in an Orange County smoke shop because of all of this media attention and headlines every day that, you know, cures depression, cures body dysmorphia, whatever it is, all these mental health things, everyone's excited about it. The media's got everybody wanting to try this. And then, you look it up and it's like, oh, it's $3,500 on a 7-month waiting list to fly to Oregon to get my medicinal, therapeutic experience. I think
Hmm.
everybody, the demand has been created. And so now, despite federal law, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking entrepreneurs, I think similar to those early cannabis pioneers, are supplying this demand. And so what
Hmm.
you see in smoke shops often, and the thing that I don't like personally, but it's a matter of necessity, right? Like in cannabis, I wanted to tell people exactly this is like 20 milligrams of THC and be really transparent and educational about how to, take these plant medicines responsibly. But because psilocybin mushrooms are illegal, what you'll see on these chocolate bars is you'll see, a trippy tie-dye, very suggestive image on the front, and then they'll either try and pretend that it's amanita mushrooms or some proprietary nootropic blend of a bunch of different plants. Usually, none of those plants are in the chocolate bars at all, but instead the research chemical called 4-ACO-DMT, which is uh, synthesized psilocybin, basically, is a research chemical that was created um, in like the 70s as a way of a legal loophole, right? You could import it into this country, give you a psychedelic effect, but it wasn't psilocybin mushroom, so technically not illegal. In the 90s or 1999, there was the Federal Analog Act that basically shut down these loopholes, saying like if it is a drug or like a drug or acts like a drug, it's a drug. But either way, this is what people are putting in these chocolate bars, and people think like, oh well, it's not psilocybin, so I can show you a piece of paper that shows it's not psilocybin. And these smoke shop owners, especially in some of the states that banned flavored nicotine or any flavored tobacco, I think what I've found was a lot of these smoke shop guys pulled all their flavored nicotine off the shelf because they're afraid that California was going to come down hard on them. There's no enforcement of any of this. Then the guy, this is like accounts for 75 to 90% of their business is these nicotine vaporizers.
Hmm.
And then they see the guy across the street start selling them again. And then eventually, oh, well, let's put it back on the shelf. And the guy across the street, he's also selling cannabis, untaxed, unlicensed cannabis. They start putting it's really kind of a monkey see, monkey do industry, and mushrooms are the latest thing. So I think actually the effect of that flavored nicotine ban was not to get flavored nicotine off the shelf, but to make every smoke shop owner realize nobody's watching what they're doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. You mentioned that when you were in the cannabis world, you were really thorough about getting your measurements and your lab results. And that's interesting because I do remember a time when I was traveling to LA before I moved here that was kind of like the wild, wild west. And like especially with edible cannabis, you had no idea if you were gonna take like a very small bite and end up like crawling on the floor, begging for help or if it was going to be a nice time or not. So that's interesting that you were kind of ahead of the game with getting the testing done.
Yeah, we contacted like all the biggest edibles companies in the state, and we all met up at Steep Hill Labs for the first time. And I still just remember, those most of the business owners were my age now or older, you know, and we had been really kicking him a lot of these people off the shelf, like competing for shelf space for about a year before we all met. And yeah, it was a cool feeling then to, see a bunch of, 35, 40, 50-year-old guys just like, who the hell are these kids that, are not only good business people, but now organizing this thing to, you know, kind of save us all. And, it really made sense. It's crazy how, without regulation, without like someone telling you this is what you need to do business, people just won't do it. And so now this is what's kind of going on in mushrooms now too. Like most mushroom products will say, this 3.5, 4 grams of mushrooms, but mushrooms really vary in potency, just like cannabis as well, you know. And so saying that you're taking a gram of mushrooms gives you kind of an idea of what you can expect to feel, but but it really has quite a wide variance. And so when I meet like I actually met a couple years ago, the first testing lab was out of Oakland, and they're because it was a decriminalized city, and so they're testing all these different mushrooms. I really felt full circle for me, you know.
Yeah.
And so I became friends with them, became friends with their scientists, and just really, I mean, the first question I asked him, I was like, "What's the range of mushrooms that you've tested?" So, if someone were to take a gram, like, is that exponent experience, right? And so it's like you can get a mushroom that's 0.1% active, or another that's 1%, right? Most people in cannabis are used to 20, 25, 30% actives, but in mushrooms, it's a super strong mushroom is 1%
Mhm.
uh, psilocybin, psilocin. But still, that range between zero point 0.1 and 1, that's a 10x experience, you know? So yeah, you really got to be careful. And I think, that's just around the corner. I'm already seeing some brands that are starting to, publish their test results, even printed on the packaging. There's a church in Oakland, the first mushroom church in the US, that now is requiring that on all of their packaging, the amount of active ingredient. I've known that guy, since 2010. He was always a cannabis pioneer guy too. I remember meeting him in San Jose. San Jose didn't allow dispensaries back in 2010, and yeah, I met him at like 8 o'clock in the morning. He's smoking like a Zeppelin sized joint, and he was saying, you know, if uh, if I'm not getting arrested, I could be doing more. And he's really taken that attitude to the next level by being a psychedelic, you know,
So
whatever
you
he's going for.
you said he runs a mushroom church now. Does that mean that the work he's doing is spiritual in nature, or is that more of like a legal cover, or is it a little of both? What do you think? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you look this guy up. His name's Dave Hodges, and the images that you'll find are him in this like Catholic archbishop's type looking robe, but the robe is covered in pot leaves. And and prior to COVID, they would have church at 4:20 on Sunday, and the only rule that they had was if you're at church, you had to smoke weed. And But anyways, no, I mean he's been on Fox News talking about his relationship with God, or his philosophy about how mushrooms are a spiritual right, and a way to communicate or experience God. And he takes super high doses and talks about it, and has a lot of community events, where he is spreading this gospel. Now, a lot of people wonder, is that all just a legal cover? My belief, well, one is that yeah, people do a lot of things for money, obviously, um, but two, that it's really hard to have cognitive dissonance over a long period of time. If you're not really believing, or at least like convinced yourself to, drink your own Kool-Aid, that it's hard to just maintain a lie forever.
Right.
So I tend to, trust that people are genuine until they can really prove to me otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. And being in LA, I know a lot of people who have worked with different psychedelic medicines, and most, I wouldn't say all of them, but I would say most of them would agree that there's a high chance of having a spiritual experience when doing that type of plant medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, his interview on Fox News is pretty funny. The guy is really a dick, and he's just like, if I started a church for crystal meth, could I do that? He's like, I guess.
Yeah, because I have a lot of people on the podcast as well who have gotten a lot of healing from doing psychedelic retreats and things. But I had a guy on just the other week who was like, "Yeah, I don't really buy it. I think it's all kind of more just like a business, and that's kind of like something you're selling." Um, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it's each individual's personal choice, and however they experience it is how they experience it.
Trust me, it is super trippy to see a combination of like, spiritual ancient medicine and capitalism,
Yeah.
to really clash. But
I'm really curious your thoughts on that collision of sort of ancient spiritual modalities and contemporary Western capitalism. And for example, like I'm sure you know there's a lot of people operating in the gray area who are facilitating plant medicine experiences for people and helping people to get a lot of healing out of that. Where do you how do you see all that landing as capitalism kind of blends into the picture and we move towards legalization?
Well, if it's anything like cannabis, I think what we'll see is, a bunch of people that get into it for the right reasons. They're really advocates for the plants and stuff, and there is a demand, right? So there's a demand for safe access to this, and then so many people think like that sounds like a really cool job that we have a complete oversupply of cannabis brands, mushroom, psychedelic therapists, and then eventually like the value of the product or the services just starts to go down. And so yeah, I think a lot of people get into it one because they're excited about it, but also when it's a new thing, you have with the seemingly this huge demand and little supply. So people get into it thinking, that they could do something that they love and also, really profit. Uh, but I think because these industries move so fast, by the time, people are deciding like, oh, mushroom chocolate bar, I should get into that business. And then, it takes them 2, 3, 6 months before they realize their brand number like 20,000 in in the US. And so, yeah, you just really have this glut. We really saw that with CBD. That was probably the fastest, like, boom to bust industries I've ever experienced, right? And
Yeah.
then, so the one thing that I try and do as like a writer about this is one, really advocate that people are making quality, great products, and especially with like functional mushrooms too, right? I just started the thing by saying functional mushrooms are the CBD of psychedelics, right? But I don't actually want that to happen in the same way that happened with CBD, right? Because there was such a green rush of people to get into that I think a lot of low quality products were made. And then people hear all this CBD hype, try one of these not great products, and then they're just like, I don't get what everybody's talking about here,
Yep.
and then kind of just write off that plant altogether and devalue the entire industry.
Hmm.
So, but now we've really seen a contraction of CBD and hemp brands. There's probably still way too many for the demand that's out there, but they'll continue to grow, and I think capitalism really just makes people act right, if you're going to keep a customer for a long time.
A lot of people would say that the green rush is over. And for the listeners out there, I'm maybe you could tell me if I'm using the word wrong, but I'm kind of referring to like the big boom of everyone trying to pile into the cannabis industry when weed became legalized, and everyone piled in, and I think there was a lot of money to be made. And then to me it seems like it's kind of over, like that industry is kind of like frozen where it is. And what do you think about that? Do you see much more growth, or is that industry frozen and now the capitalists move on to the next plant, if you will?
Well, I mean, on a daily basis, I see this, right, with people that come into my office that are, cannabis people, and they have, 15 dispensaries that each owe them between 50 and $100,000. They're not paying their bills. They have 6 9 month terms, which was never a thing, Give a drug dealer 9 months to pay you back, not a good idea, you know. And so yeah, there's a complete over supply of these. Not to mention that the taxes are onerous, and you can go on Instagram or anywhere and get high quality cannabis delivered to your door without those taxes. Um, and so yeah, the government's really the only one that's profiting from it, and there are big corporations that I think they're entire strategy with cannabis is, well, one, the profitability was really there years ago because it was illicit. Now that it's not illicit, growing cannabis is extremely easy. It was never super difficult, and the price of a pound has gone from like 3,000 to 300, literally decimated. But uh, but yeah, so the black market accounts for over 90% of the cannabis sales in California. So that's no good for the dispensary owners. Um, and nobody's paying their bills. But I think the big companies are the ones that realize, like, oh, we could lose money for 5 or 10 years until every mom and pop goes out of business and we're the only ones left standing.
Hmm. Hmm. Do
So
you so you've moved on from cannabis and you're into functional mushrooms. I want to ask what is in your functional mushrooms, but it's a two-part question. Do you have any plans to move into the psychedelic psilocybin mushrooms, or is it going to be strictly like the functional kind of lion's mane stuff, or what are the plans there?
yeah, when I was younger, I was definitely more of a risk taker, and now, as I'm getting older, I try to, still really be a part of that world because I find it really inspiring and exciting. So now what I do, because I have this other company, Custom Capsule Consultants, we make all sorts of different formulations for a lot of different companies. So, and as part of my like journalism for Rolling Stone, I get to meet a lot of these mushroom guys. Most of them, 99% of them, were former cannabis guys that are just moving on to something else because this is where the money's at now, and they've already got the branding, distribution, experience. But uh, but yeah, so I have got to help like with some formulations and product development with some of these guys, which is a way for me to work on the products, and use my experience as a measuring actives in plant medicine guy, and come up with cool stuff without losing sleep at night about distributing these things on my own. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think almost every functional mushroom company would love the opportunity to work with the real stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So what is in the microboost currently at this time?
Yeah, we work with 5 different functional mushrooms. So the lion's mane, that one's good for your brain, cognitive enhancer. What it does is similar thing, the same exact thing that microdosing psilocybin does. Two things. One is called neurogenesis, which is the formation of new brain cells, and then neuroplasticity, which is the formation of new neural connections. Right
Mm.
now, with psychedelics, like extreme cases, you have something like synesthesia, right, where you can like see music or taste color, right, and your senses are really crossed, and that's like an extreme example of neuroplasticity. But I think the smaller example, and with people that are using lion's mane or psilocybin mushrooms, is just making these like kind of new grooves in the forest. I like to think like new paths, and they bring like a heightened awareness, I think, to our mind and our decision making. And for me, it's got to a point where I just realize like so much of my emotions and thoughts and actions are like reactions to other people's actions or attitudes, and shining that extra awareness on it just allows me, I think, for me to be able to kind of free myself of that feeling of like not being in control, and realizing that each moment is kind of a choice, and is it really serving me to react in a way that just really punishes myself, or rise above, or what have you.
Nice.
So Lion's Mane is really cool for that, and that's why I think they're associated with psychedelics the most. Cordyceps is another awesome mushroom. I was thinking about that for, can you survive this podcast, right? Cordyceps was a fictional strain of Cordyceps was the subject of the HBO show. What is the name of it? It just came out. It was based on a video game, The Last of Us. The Last of Us, right?
Okay.
And so it's about this fictional strain of cordyceps that turns people into zombies, right? It's actually based on, there's like over 400 different species of cordyceps, and one of them actually turns ants into zombies.
I've seen this. It makes them crazy, and they grow like a horn out of their head or something, and the mushroom takes control of starts controlling their body and stuff.
Yeah, it can control their body like a race car, and the spores are implanted in the brain, and yeah, they have the ant like go back to the colony and spread the spores to the rest of the colony. So I'm
Crazy.
sure that's where the idea for the video game and TV show came from, and really contributed to mycophobia, as we call it. I think a lot of people have fear of mushrooms, but hopefully that wasn't too bad for it. But cordyceps is Cordyceps militaris, which we use in our products, is a natural energy booster. It's really great for getting extra oxygen to the lungs, VO2 enhancer. So a lot of athletes use it as a pre-workout. I have a product for Microboost called Brain that's a combination of lion's mane and cordyceps. I really use that as like my entrepreneurial fuel. It gets my mind lit up, and extra energy for my body. One of my favorite like cordyceps anecdotes was in the 90s. The Chinese women's Olympic track team won a bunch of gold medals, so much so that they were drug tested, and they passed all the drug tests. And when they asked the coach, what was your secret, he credited cordyceps mushrooms was why they were so excellent in their competition. So those are two really cool ones. And then we also work with reishi. Reishi is like nicknamed by the Chinese the mushroom of immortality, and it's great antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. A lot of these mushrooms are great for anti-inflammation, and inflammation is one of the main sources for a lot of disease in the body. And so these things help you kind of remove your body of toxins. And mushrooms are nature's kind of transformative fungi, right? It can take decaying material and transform it into new life. And so I think that's kind of, I think, what they do in the brain. And when I was talking earlier about the book I wrote when I first came out here. I was ghostwriting this book about redwood trees and their interconnected root system. Mushrooms have what's called mycelium. And mycelium is the root system of mushrooms, and they kind of act as like the World Wide Web for ecology or for an ecosystem, right? They're the biggest living organism on our planet. You know, there's some mycelial mass up in the forests of Oregon that are over 2 miles across, right?
Wow.
But this mycelial network shares information, nutrients. I read an article in The Guardian a couple years ago about how scientists were proving like some of the signals that mycelium spread throughout a forest, like recognize patterns that resembled words. And like the headline of the article is that, you know, scientists prove mushrooms are speaking at least 50 different words. Uh,
Wow.
and so I think that the way that you know they connect our ecosystems, um, you know, they really know where in a forest, you know, nutrients or you know, different things are needed. And I think that's my kind of theory about how they work on humans as well, right? You know, what's good for me is not necessarily what's good for you. And so I think with the continual use of people are well, I think for me, it's like increasing awareness and awareness of the body, but also just like helping people in different new profound ways that we're just really beginning to have the funding to research and understand. So that's like what is most exciting for me.
Do you think a lot of a lot of these benefits you're talking about sound amazing and how the mushrooms work is really fascinating. Is that sort of exclusive to the magic mushrooms, or does that apply to the lion's mane and the reishi and everything?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the differences with the mushroom legalization and the direction it's going versus cannabis legalization is the pharmaceutical companies are very interested in psychedelics because of the research that's happening that is, you know, showing tremendous results for treatment resistant depression and, you know, these big things that pharmaceuticals have been trying to tackle forever. And one of the things that a lot of these companies are now doing is trying to really understand what in psilocybin mushrooms is, you know, creating these mental breakthroughs, and they're trying to like isolate those parts and remove the part that gives you the psychoactive psychedelic experience, right? And
Mhm.
so I find that really interesting, and you know, I think a big reason why you know it's going to happen so much faster legalization understanding than cannabis did. But no, like I was talking about, you know, when I was a kid, or I was doing the I can't believe it's pot butter business. There was this piece on CNN with Sanjay Gupta. I think it was like 2014, 2015. And he goes on CNN and he was talking about CBD. He did this whole big piece on it. And I got calls from, you know, I was like the black sheep in the family. I get calls from like my grandma, my aunt, you know, and they're just like, "Did you see this? Did you know there's a form of cannabis that has all the medical benefits but doesn't get you high?" I was like, "I've been telling you this for years, grandma," you know. But uh, but yeah, functional mushrooms are definitely that, particularly lion's mane and cordyceps that are have the ability to rewire our brain. Now, you know, I think that the psychedelics might be a, you know, a faster like bullet train to some of those changes, but uh, but yeah, lion's mane for me is just it's like a great natural source of energy where you know I just see have more clarity, and I think that that's what you know ultimately psychedelics are the point of them is just to have more awareness and you know kind of see with our eyes wide open.
Beautiful. For someone, would you have any advice for someone who's listening to this and maybe they want to try either microdosing or some type of functional mushroom supplement? And where would you recommend they start? Do you have any advice for someone listening?
Yeah, well, microdosing, psychedelics, I just go on, if you don't have a personal like referral of a friend that could tell you like try this brand or this product, one, you can grow mushrooms at home for, really cheap. It is legal to buy the spores and like a little mushroom grow kit, for $30, and you could have everything you need and put it in your closet. You don't need lights like cannabis, and you can grow an ounce of mushrooms in 4 to 6 weeks. Otherwise, like if you're looking for a product and don't know a referral, Reddit is a great place for learning about different places to find it online. With the functionals, you got to watch out for the snake oil salespeople. So this is kind of in the weeds, but it was a good question. I want to answer it in the proper way. So when you grow functional mushrooms commercially, they're grown on a substrate, some sort of starchy material like grain or corn, and you inoculate this substrate with your spores, and those spores grow into the mycelium or the root system of the mushroom. And then from that mycelium, out of the substrate pops the fruiting body or the stem and the cap, or in lion's mane's case, it looks like a cheerleader's pom pom. That's the fruiting body of the mushroom, and that's what contains the majority of the medicinal benefits. Now, and because I'm in the supplement industry and in mushrooms, I learned that most functional mushroom companies, that when they grow, they don't grow their own mushrooms commercially, but they buy the material from growers. And so they don't buy the fruiting body, which is the more expensive, part of the growing process. That part is harvested and sold in a farmer's market, or to a higher bidder. What they buy is that substrate material, that myceliated oats, and they pulverize that and make that into their functional mushroom supplements. Now, there is plenty of studies that show that mycelium also has, medicinal properties to it, but the ratio of how much is in there versus the fruiting body. At first, I thought maybe this is like, 2 to 1, or 3 to 1, 4 to 1. It's like 500 to 1 of
Oh,
how much
wow.
more medicinal properties are in the fruiting body versus the oats or the mycelium. Not to mention that it's also the oats that are pulverized and stuff too. So not only do you have something that's 1/500th as strong as the fruiting body, it's also diluted by tons of oats and grains. Now, not every mushroom company will explicitly say made from myceliated oats. Some of them will, but there's a petition right now with the FDA, with our company and a handful of companies that are petitioning that if you're selling myceliated products, you can't be able to call it mushrooms. You shouldn't be able to call it mushrooms. You shouldn't be able to have a mushroom image on the packaging because it confuses and obfuscates, what's actually in there to the buyer. And this is my main concern, that people are going to buy this stuff that is, 1/1000th as strong as the product that people have been reading about as being so life changing and noticeable, and they're going to be like, oh, this is just another snake oil bullshit. So yeah, if you're looking for a functional mushroom product, I would love it if you tried Microboost, but we're not the only ones out there that are making products with fruiting bodies. So just my recommendation would be like look for companies that are advertising using only whole fruiting bodies.
Good to know. Very good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any dangers involved? Like if someone got a mushroom grow kit and maybe they grew like a psychedelic mushroom on their own or something, are there any dangers involved here? Like what do people need to know as a precaution? Don't just go diving into the deep end.
Yeah, I mean, you start creating new neural connections, they could go in good or bad ways, right? So my advice always is really to start small, right? Just like the edibles, you can't get a refund once you've eaten that entire chocolate bar. But I think one of the reasons why mushrooms are becoming more popular is this concept of microdosing. When I was a kid, it was just like, eat a handful of mushrooms and go run around the graveyard at night like a madman. But now this idea of microdosing, instead of diving into the ice cold pool, you can really dip your toe in there and kind of gradually ease your way into it. So that's always the best advice if you're not going to be in the clinical therapist guided ceremony, or a shaman sort of guided ceremony. But yeah, absolutely. There's the dark side of everything. People with bipolar disorder and some other mental illnesses are really highly suggested not to use psychedelics, as they can trigger episodes. There's a lot of these people that get into psychedelics that develop a god complex of sorts. They are some sort of, like, religious bearer of this medicine, at least in their mind. And sometimes, yeah, people use any sort of power or authority in a bad way too. So that's something to look out for and consider.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you for sharing all this information. I'm curious, have you had some psychedelic experiences in your own life?
100%, 100%. Microdosing over the past few years has really changed my life in a lot of ways, and mostly just to, like, I was kind of talking about earlier, just realizing that so much of the stress or frustration or or anguish that I experience was just like unconscious reactions to other people's actions or experiences or my own feelings, and that everything is really a matter of perspective. And so the gradual shift in my perspective over the past few years, really with getting back into this and using it as a medicinal thing, not just a graveyard freak out thing once a year, uh, has been awesome. And so I do a lot of sales, right? Sales involves eating a lot of shit. And so, I'll have a phone call or something that doesn't go great, and I'll hang up the phone, and I'm just like, you know, wow, normally I'd be, you know, like, even just like physically feeling something in my body that's like, that I didn't like that, you know. And then I had these experiences where I was just like, I don't feel that bad. Oh yeah, I took the microdose this morning, you know?
Nice. Nice.
So yeah, that's been awesome for me. Anything that, especially as an entrepreneur, that you can shift your perspective and always like try and maintain that positivity for the next sales call. Like, I've been looking for that my whole life. I've been doing sales my whole life, like, I always wanted like this magical tool that would allow me to just bounce back and just have everything just kind of roll off my back.
I think, I just want to add one other thing. I think your creative writing degree really completely paid off just with exclusively the name. I can't believe it's pot brownies.
Oh yeah, I can't
Or
believe it's hot butter.
I
Yeah.
can't believe it's pot butter. Yeah, fantastic name. I think you got your money's worth in your writing degree just after just coming up with that name. That's a great one.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah. So, anyone who maybe wants to dip their toe into this business, do you have any advice for like a young entrepreneur who's interested in getting into a business like this?
Yeah, it's got to be your passion, right? Like we talked about it, you can't fake it forever, and to really be a successful entrepreneur, like, you gotta Imagine you're going to spend at least, 5, 10 years making this happen. So yeah, I mean, passion, learning from other people, you know, that's the fastest way that I've really learned about any of these new plant medicines that I get into, right? Is just really just try and immerse myself, always be interested, uh, always ask questions and be a affable person that people want to talk to and tell you their secrets and their experiences. I think that creative writing degree has been helpful for this pursuit of mine, right? Because I think when people find out you're a writer, they want to tell you their story, and so that's been a real advantage for me to be able to learn from so many cool people with decades and decades more experience than I have. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, entrepreneur, like you got to be ready to be punched in the face pretty much every day, and just keep getting up like a Rocky or something. So if you're ready for that, just go into that eyes wide open. You really gotta love the fight to be able to deal with that.
I appreciated what you said too about it, just accepting that you're kind of going to lock into this for 5 to 10 years and like this is what you're doing. I think that's really great advice to remind people that it takes time. You know, anything that's going to be good and be worth it is going to take a lot of time and hard work. So I appreciated that you put that reminder out there. Like anyone out there working on something, it's going to take time and just like dive into it fully. So I appreciate that advice.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that from Tony Robbins. He said like pretty much everybody overestimates what they can do in a year and underestimates what they can do in 5 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So being that this is Can You Survive This podcast, and I know you've had maybe some psychedelic experiences in your life, I have a hypothetical survival scenario that is in the psychedelic journey world, and I'm wondering if you are down to play this hypothetical survival game.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, bring it on.
Okay, let's give it a shot. So, and again, it's going to be 10 A or B questions, but I always have to remind the guests. Let's say I say A or B, but you're like, I feel like there's a C in there that I would do. Always feel free to kind of push back and your
Cool.
explanation is the fun part. So,
Awesome.
we will dive right in. For this hypothetical survival scenario, you are about to embark on a profound psychedelic journey with the guidance of a skilled facilitator. This journey aims to explore the depths of your mind and consciousness. Before the journey, you're advised to follow a specific diet to enhance the experience. First question: do you A, stick to a plant based diet for a few days or more before the journey, or B, restrict your meat intake to once a day in the days leading up to the journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're gonna do something like ayahuasca, from what I've heard, you want to do both A and B. You don't do any drugs, you don't have any sex, you don't eat any salt, you don't eat any meat. You try and stick to as much whole, nutritious foods as possible. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I haven't done ayahuasca.
Oh, really? You haven't tried that one yet?
No, no, I haven't. I'm intimidated, but I do find it super fascinating.
Yeah, we've had a lot of veterans on the podcast who have done like veteran-based ayahuasca retreats, and it is pretty unanimous that they report a high level of healing and transformation, but also a great deal of it's typically quite challenging to get through the experience. Uh,
Yeah.
so that's typically what's reported. So good answer though. A and B, purifying yourself, kind of dieting in all possible ways so that you come into the experience super clean. So you get that one correct. Next question. Um, as you know, that the pre-journey diet includes more than just food. Do you A, avoid watching any movies or engaging with social media for a few days before the journey, or B, engage with films and content that are thought provoking in order to come up with ideas of what to work on during the journey?
I definitely wouldn't turn on the news. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, yeah, for me personally, I think mushrooms really remind me to disconnect and disconnect as often as possible. And I'm also a film buff, a writer. So I love TV and movies and fiction and novels. But uh, but yeah, my advice for this one would be to really travel inward and as a writer too, I try to not read other really inspiring writers to me before I'm working on a piece because I don't want to like sound like them. I want to sound like myself.
Yeah, yeah. Good answer. And yeah, you got that one right. And I just want to shout out that I did read your Rolling Stone article recently. So fantastic writer over here. How long you been writing for Rolling Stone?
Since November 2021, I think was the first piece.
Okay,
Yeah, so I've
cool.
got 15 pieces now. If you Google Robert Johnson, Rolling Stone, you'll find, a guy who sold his soul to the devil to learn how to play the guitar. He's the founder of the blues is Robert Johnson. But if you search Robert Johnson mushrooms Rolling Stone, you'll find my 15 different articles. And I write about functionals and psychedelics, including some of that stuff I was telling you about myceliated oats or pretty much anything you've heard on this podcast. I probably have an article about.
Yeah, the mycelium network is really interesting and how that's communicating and sending nutrients and stuff. Um, all right, we're still in the preparation phase of your journey. You've got everything correct so far on the hypothetical survival scenario. Um, so you abstain from movies and social media to ensure a clearer mental space. In order to strengthen your body and nervous system before the journey, do you A, integrate daily meditation and breath work into your routine, or B, increase your weightlifting and cardio so you have a strong body for the journey?
I guess it depends if you're going into the Peruvian jungle for your shamanic experience. But no, I would go with A on this one. You're planning for a an inner battle and challenge. But maybe not a bad idea to put in a few push-ups too, in case there's like a panther or something in your way.
Yeah, but generally good to strengthen your meditation and your internal strength.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, so moving right along, you are now in a plant medicine ceremony, and as the psychedelic experience intensifies, you start feeling a bit overwhelmed. Do you A, reach out to your facilitator for guidance on managing the overwhelming feelings, or B, embrace the intensity, allowing the experience to unfold?
Well, I think with most psychedelics, if you choose A, you're also still gonna have to go through it yourself, and it is good to have the guide there, but that guide is really just bringing you back to yourself and gonna calm you down so you can go into that B experience, where you just accept it and work through it, right? I was talking yesterday with a friend of mine about a book and a movie that I really like, No Country for Old Men, like
Love
Corman.
that movie.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a quote from there. It's just like, you never know what greater misfortune your misfortune might have saved you from, you know. And
Yeah. Yeah, I love that quote actually. It reminds me I had a buddy, good friend of mine. He was a cop actually, and he's like I'm gonna mess up the proverb, but it's supposed to be like an ancient proverb where it's like, um, oh, your son broke his leg. That's so terrible. And
right,
then the people come to recruit people for the war and they say, "Oh, he had a broken leg so he didn't have to go to war. That's great." And then, the war he would have been in would have bringing him great honor. So they say, oh, he didn't get to have the honor, so that's terrible. But then, it's there's always like something he misses out on, and then something he gains from missing it. I think I totally messed up the proverb, but hopefully you got what
Oh
you got.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. And yeah, so I think, with a bad trip or a challenging trip, that's all just a stepping stone to, what your body or what your mind is telling you that you need for our evolution.
Yeah, well said. Well said. All right. So you embrace the intensity and you allow the experience to unfold naturally. The visuals become vivid and you find yourself in a surreal landscape. Do you A, close your eyes and focus on internal sensations, or B, explore the landscape interacting with the visuals?
Well, yeah, I think I would do both too. So I am so fascinated by ayahuasca and scared of it, and the way that I like try to alleviate my own fears through education and understanding. And so I've like heard a ton of anecdotes about ayahuasca, but I've read some like scientific studies about it. What's really cool is that it's like the only thing that we can take where if you do brain scans of people on ayahuasca, there's parts of their brains that are lit up only when you're awake, and then other parts of your brain that are lit up only when you're like lucid dreaming. And so that's really, it seems like anecdotally what a lot of people are describing in their ayahuasca experience, right? They're kind of, like you would have, closed eyes, visuals and instant manifestation, even open eye hallucinations, and kind of the melding of the dream world and our waking life. So I find that really fascinating, theoretically, and I think that the the pineal gland and what regulates our sleep, our serotonin, our DMT in our bodies is a real key to I don't know, understanding the different dimensions, even just sleep. I think sleep is something that maybe 100 years from now people might be like, I can't believe humans just never really considered that they're going to another dimension for 7, 8 hours every day. They just wake up, have a cup of coffee, and sit in traffic and don't give it another thought.
Yeah, I think sleep is super fascinating. I want to have a sleep expert on one day to
Yeah.
like what is going on here?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I would close my eyes and enjoy it, and also explore that forest with the, you know, eye out for the panthers.
I'm sure you can do both, with all these parts of your brain lit up. You can probably do it all while just sitting there.
Yeah, you
Um,
can go to Neptune from your couch.
exactly. I had on a couple weeks ago, I had on a guy named Luke Jensen, and they do QEEG brain mapping combined with he's down in Peru doing ayahuasca retreats, and they do before and after brain mapping. And he was into brain mapping like before he was into like plant medicine stuff. But it's super fascinating. I'm thinking about having him ship me some brain device, and I'm gonna do some brain mapping on myself. I find that stuff just like fascinating.
Same, same.
Yeah, so I'll have to keep you posted on if I do the brain mapping, and I'll let you know where it ends up.
Please do.
Okay, so you're exploring. We only got a few questions left, by the way.
All right.
Um, you're exploring the surreal landscape. You're interacting with the visuals. Suddenly, the atmosphere becomes challenging, and you feel a sense of fear. Do you A, confront the fear, exploring its origin, or B, request support from your facilitator to navigate through the challenging emotions?
You know, I've never done a group like psychedelic trip, a ceremony thing, and I it's kind of awkward for me actually. I'm on panels with Native American shamans and all these people, and they'll invite me to it, and I'm just more like I kind of like to microdose at the zoo sort of thing, but one of these days, I'm gonna do one of those things, and I think if you're going and doing a ceremony where you have a guide, that if you feel inclined to use them, that's what they're there for. So
For sure.
yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to face my fear or to reach out to the community, right? Because they're there to support you. And
Yep.
when you're high enough on mushrooms, we realize there's no separation between us anyway. So maybe you're helping yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. And asking for help is it's probably helping everyone, you know. Maybe that's just the thing that needed to happen in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. So I wouldn't be afraid to do either.
Fantastic. So you get your help from the facilitator and you end up finding the source of the fear, which causes it to dissipate, and you achieve a state of inner peace and bliss. After the psychedelic journey, the group emphasizes the importance of integration. Do you A, journal about your experience to gain insights and reflections, or B, choose not to dwell on the experience, assuming it will naturally integrate over time?
Yeah, integration is everything. So a lot of these, I would say, either or both. But in this case, I think there's a clear winner. Yeah, if you're not learning from that, extreme experience, then I don't know what the point is.
Yeah, for sure. You got to take something out of it. Otherwise, it's just, I guess, escapism.
Yeah.
Okay, two more questions. You journal about the experience, gaining valuable insights and reflections. As you gain insight, you feel the overwhelming urge to call a former colleague and tell them how you really feel. Do you A, call your former colleague and tell them what's on your mind, or B, wait at least a couple days before making any serious heavy phone calls?
I think this is a good thing that in the beginning we got rid of the social media and the devices and stuff. Yeah, I definitely you don't want to call an ex-girlfriend or a boss on a head full of acid. Not a good idea.
Have you done acid before?
Oh, sure, sure.
Okay, cool, cool. Just curious. Okay, last question. You wait a few days before making any phone calls. You choose to sit with your feelings. Once you've sat with these feelings after the experience, do you A, integrate the lessons learned into your daily habits and behaviors, or B, keep the psychedelic experience separate from your daily life?
No, that is definitely another a clear answer here. Yeah, integrating it. I think there's better living through chemistry, but it's just a way to show us, I think, what's there underneath the surface all the time, right? And so that integration and doing psychedelics every once in a while is that reminder that that the world is more mystical and there's a lot of stuff going on that we can't explain or that we can't comprehend, with our minds the way they are now. And so that's that's good to never forget that, And if you have to microdose, once a week or 5 times a week to continue to recall it, just do that until it becomes second nature, that the world is as exciting and mystical and awesome.
The world is exciting and mystical and awesome. I agree. Thank you for your insights. Congratulations, you have survived this podcast. You are officially prepared for your first group psychedelic journey based on my questionnaire we've done here. Um, and yeah, as we wrap up here, is there anything else you want to share with the world, or where can they find you?
Yeah, well, this has been one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. You can find Microboost at microboost.com. It's spelled with a Y, like mycology, MYCRO boost on Instagram. I'm Bobby J LA on Instagram. You can find, my latest Rolling Stone pieces there. Or like I said, Robert Johnson, Mushrooms, Rolling Stone, not the black guitar player sold his soul to the devil, but the white guy who interviews a bunch of mushroom chocolate companies and functional mushroom companies and some people doing some real cool research into the mind.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. And maybe this time next year or in a few months, we'll have another check-in and you can share sort of what else you've learned. I'm sure there's going to be more conferences and interviews and research and all sorts of cool information emerging. So I'd love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, and I feel prepared for my first ceremony now. So thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Once you do your first ceremony, hit me up and we'll have you back on.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.